Hey guys, thank you for joining us again for Anchored and Voted. I'm Pastor Jer.
And I'm Pastor Joseph. We're so excited.
You're good for me, man. You help me get excited in ways that I'm not naturally excited. Which you know. I mean, yes, we met because I was cracking jokes, but that doesn't mean I'm actually a fun guy. That just means, maybe I'm witty. I tend to be more of a stick in the mud, and I don't know how much of that has to do with how many visual cues I miss because of my sight, or I should actually say, because that sounds disparaging to blind people, like blind people can't be funny. I think it's actually because of how much I try to depend on my sight that I miss so many other things. I'm like, I couldn't see that at all. Well, why were you trying to? Anyway, that's probably, I've been too vulnerable.
When I'm feeling good and I'm in a good space, then I can laugh a lot and I'm in a good space. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful day. It has nothing to do with the weather. It has more to do with being able to go before God with you and our listeners and know that the other things that we try and live by, we'll be fine. And so I'm not trying to live by the bread. I'm living by the Spirit. And so I'm good.
Amen. Amen. Well, Dave, today we are going to talk about, the title for today's episode is Sacred Identity.
Oh, we bumped into it. Okay.
Yep, finally. We've had this on the list for a while. We've been playing topic roulette. And we finally got hit with it.
Okay.
So, story time. My daughter was sitting in church with me recently, and we were listening to the pastor talk about various places that the church ministers, and he was reciting some stats about the various religions that are, how many people are in this religion versus that religion, just to demonstrate the size and the presence of Christianity around the world, as laying out the need for the missions and evangelism that he was going to then talk about. So my daughter turns to me and she says, "What is Buddhism? What's Hinduism?" And so I say, "Great question. Too much for right here. Let's talk about it over lunch." So we're talking about religion later that day in general, and I'm coming at this saying, okay, how do I take how do I express what I believe that doesn't put on her some kind of expectation for blind conformity, right? She's asking good questions. I wanted to think through this. I don't want to just hand her pad answers that she could then run off with and actually be unprepared. B, she has a mind. She should be thinking through these things. I want to present her with it. So I'm thinking through all this now. I'm trying to lay out what's a religion, and the way I decided to go. As I said, I want to talk first about two different concepts that we're going to talk about as we go further. One is a religion. The second concept is a worldview. And I broke down for her the difference between a worldview and a religion. I said religions all fall into the category of worldview in that they have a worldview, but what makes a worldview different than a religion is going to have a fundamental belief that there is a or many gods that we are responsible to. A worldview does not necessarily have that aspect, that there is in fact a deity. A worldview is a construct of, I think it's best understood, or perhaps not best, but certainly well understood, in terms of 5 fundamental questions that are being answered. And I walked her through these questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What's the problem? What's the solution? And where are we going? And I walked her through, and I showed her with these 5 questions how not just various religions answer this, but how various worldviews that aren't religions also answer this, to give her, as comprehensive a thought experiment as possible. Okay. Great setup, Jer. What's it have to do with today's topic? Well, it has to do it in this way. There are, in fact, fundamental questions that guide the way that we live. For Christians, I believe one of those fundamental questions is, who am I and how do I know? I don't know that we actively engage with and wrestle consciously with these questions sufficiently often enough. I think it is something that we can take for granted. I think it's something we can answer simply and move on. But I think it's something that requires, because of how profound the answers shape our world.
Yeah.
I think it is necessary to step back, ask these questions often, and go back through the answering process, because I think they have many, many implications. So I'll show you my cards here, Dave. I happen to be a Christian by choice. And in the Christian worldview, the question, who am I, is answered in two ways. One, I'm a creation of an all powerful, all knowing, all loving God. Two, as a Christian, I have been accepted, adopted into his family by the work of his Son, and I've been given a new nature so that I reflect his character as a part of his family. So there's a dual nature to this identity, one which you and I share because we are human, and one which you and I share because we are brothers of the same adopted father. One which you and I don't share with someone who has not been adopted by our father, but we do share the first part, again, because we are humans. So in Christianity, the way that theologians like to talk about this is by Latin phrases, right? Theologians love them some Latin phrases. The phrase is imago Dei, or the image of God. And this comes out of Genesis 1 and is repeated in Genesis 3. God created man in his image. In his own likeness and image, God created men and women. That has such profound implications for how we understand what it means to be human, as opposed to being simply a mammal. It separates the way that we think about humanity from every other creature. And if we don't have that distinctive, the distinctiveness of humans versus pigs gets immediately wiped out. And now we are simply a smarter version of a pig, or a bipedal version of a pig. And this has implication for what kind of food I eat, and how I take care of animals, and how I use the land that pigs might live on, has immediate implications. Each of us answer this question in some way. And so I think the second question is actually the one that is really necessary to wrestle with as well. How do I know?
Gotcha.
Who am I? And how do I know? So that's where I'm coming from with this. And I've just laid out all of my exposition. I'm about to put my hands in my pockets, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, I like the question because, as you stated, often when things are calm, it's easy to not worry about. When when you're a disciple and you're on land and Jesus is telling everyone to eat some fish, and we're praying over and everyone's getting a meal, everything's good. And then we get in the boat and he's asleep and things are different. Or he's walking on water and I'm not with him. Again, things are very different then. It's hard to handle that God blesses both the saint and the sinner at the same time for some things. And then there are specific things where he blesses only the believer, like with correction. And
right. Such a blessing.
And yes, it causes me to draw near, but it feels like the other person should be getting it. And yet he's offering them grace, and that's frustrating me because I came to salvation at 6, and they are going to come at 60 or 90,
or never.
Well, the never isn't the issue. It's more I mean, it should be, but it is more the one who comes later on in life. And I'm jealous because they got to be a heathen for so long. And um, what, we're being honest, we're having
That's
a normal
hilarious.
conversation. Right? And it's, it's in that you struggle knowing that, okay, yes, this person is made in the image. Um, and yet I don't seek fairness in my own life, and yet I want it for them. Because it seems so unfair, and it's often the prayer, like, God, this is so unfair. And yet, I really don't want him to be fair when it comes to my forgiveness or the grace he extends to me, because if
Right.
it was,
Yep.
there'd be a whole bunch of cattle I'd have to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not a good look for me, at least. Knowing and living it out are two different things. And in the midst of a storm, living out your identity, when the spirit lives within you, is hard if I haven't built up that muscle for listening during the times of peace. If I haven't taken the time to really secure the truth, so that even when I don't feel it, I might not believe it for myself, I still know it's real. Um, it's what is required to believe in him. Who is he? Those things are outside of me, and so I don't need them um, to feel good. I need to know them because they are true. And so, have I done this? Yes. So I know that I've placed my faith in him. Am I being faithful right now or fearful right now? That doesn't disregard my relationship to him, unless I allow the fear to define me versus um, my savior defining me. Um, you look at the four C's that were thrown out, and the cares of the world got one. And that always concerns me, because there are so many things that we care about that God does not, or he cares about and says, I got it, and you shouldn't worry about it.
Right.
Being um, being clear to um, rest in the relationship, commune with the relationship, abide in the relationship, so that we can bear fruit as we are called to do, and all of us are called to do it, not just missionaries or pastors or those with a gift of evangelism, but we're all called to live this out as living stones in him. Um, is challenging if my focus is not solely on him. So in my quiet time this morning, I was reading the story where Moses in the wilderness, he already knows he's not going to make it into the promised land because he slapped a rock too hard. And um, the people start grumbling again, which I just can't believe, like, they're actually doing it again. Because we've already seen a whole bunch of people get swallowed up in by the dirt and all kinds of crazy stuff happening. You're just going, really, people? And God releases serpents to bite them, and God tells Moses to have, and this is after Aaron's already died, to have a serpent, made of bronze, put on a stick and lifted up, and anyone who gazes upon it will be saved. Yep. And in my quiet time, what stuck with me this morning was just the fact that it wasn't a profession of mouth, that it was a turning of the head and raising of the eyes and a yielding of the heart. Because you could look away. You could choose not to look in that direction and die. And yet, God is being gracious even in that, offering a way out, when the reality is, they didn't deserve it.
It strikes me just now for the first time that there's perhaps something of an ironic response in what God told them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reason that they were being attacked by these snakes was because God judged them because they didn't obey Him. They didn't obey Him because they didn't like what He said, or they were like, it doesn't really matter anyway. So, I don't see the point. I'm not going to do it. And then God tells Moses, all right, here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to give you something. I'm not going to tell you why. I'm just going to tell you that. You tell them that. And we're not telling them why either. And they can either choose to obey without knowing why, or they can choose their own way. And if they obey without knowing why, I'll save them. If they don't, they can have their own way. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but as I think through that passage, I wouldn't discount that at all. You talked about conflict.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea here of who I am as a person, the only time it is ever important is when it comes into conflict with something else. When I'm with my friends at 14 years old and they're saying, hey, I found a pack of cigarettes, let's smoke them. There's something here in the store that I want. Let's take it. Let's use the 5-finger discount. It's at that moment of conflict that my identity becomes necessary. Before that, it was fine. Before that, not a question, because there was nothing at stake. But now, confronted with the decision that I have to make, do I do this or do I don't? This question of who am I, how do I know, and what does it mean for how I respond in this moment becomes crucially important. That's, I think, why this is one that resonates with me, is because there are questions all over the place that we are confronted with, that we are challenged with. And if we don't know who we are, we may very well answer the question well and wrong without understanding. Let me give an example here. I think that I grew up in the 80s, right? I know that. I don't think that. I know I grew up in the 80s.
So that's not something to...
Not up for debate here.
Yeah.
There was the Save the Whales campaign during the 80s, right? Saw the bumper stickers and the billboards all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I think saving whales is a great thing. I do. I think they're beautiful, majestic creatures. I think that killing them for the sake of eating their fin or for the sake of using their blubber, it's a resource. I get it. If it's the only way to do something, okay, there's an argument to be made there, but to do it wantonly, recklessly, without concern for whether or not you're actually destroying a species, that's a whole different story. So how do I then answer the question, if saving the whale means sacrificing these people, how do I work that question? If there's a train, there's 2 trains coming and there's one bridge. One of those trains has 100 people who are in your family. One of those trains has a whale. And you're at the switch. Do you remember those questions from college? I know you do, because we've talked about them. You hated them back then too. But that's the question. I'm not asking that because I want you to answer it. That's the reason that understanding identity is necessary. Because unless I understand who I am and who you are, I can't actually place how I need to respond to you in this situation. If you're nothing but a semi-conscious bag of air-breathing bones and blood, why do I care if you've chosen to go live in the woods and it's the middle of winter and you're dying from the cold? Why do I care? Is it just because it makes me feel good because I'm doing something that I think is good?
Mm.
Or is there actually a reason that I should care for you? Are there other animals that are out there freezing in the cold at the same time? Maybe. Should I care about them the same way? That's a question that's answered by how I answer this question. Who am I? How do I know? And what does it mean for me right now? And as we're in the midst of a time in our culture when this question of identity is really up in the air. And it's not just a question of identity, it's how do I know And the general answer is, I know who I am because I said so. The question that I have to ask is that answer going to be sufficient to keep this ball in the air? Or is that ball going to fall on the ground and break? I know what I think. But what I think is not nearly as important as the work I want you, dear friend, dear listener, to do in thinking through this yourself. The same as I want my kids to think through this. Because being able to answer the question is only possible when you've taken the time to think through it. So that's my challenge. I mean, at the end of the day, that's my challenge here with us. To really give time and space to sit down and wrestle through these questions. Who am I? How do I know? And then let that actually inform the question, how then do I act in this situation? What does it mean for me?
How do I live?
Yep. And that's a conversation that I would enjoy having with anybody. I think the reason that we can is because inside each of us is a desire to have that question answered, a need to have that question answered in a satisfying way. I really empathize with people who are asking that question, who are trying to build an identity, even an identity that I look at and say that's not going to do it for you. I understand why they're doing it. I understand the need that's driving that. The need's real. I want to engage with you and help you, just as you help me, validate that the conclusions I've come to are able to hold the weight of my life. And with that profound analogy, I'm done.
And I think we're done. This is Angered and Devoted. It's another fun time getting into sticky stuff. We hope you've enjoyed yourself. If not, we did our job. And I pray that God will use this for His glory and to encourage you to live better. You know how to catch us, anchoredanddevoted@gmail.com. Jeremy will respond because he checks the emails. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed one.
Bye.